Chapter 15 The Heart of Decay. The path to the heart of the ruined capital was a gauntlet of decay and despair. As Elara, Kaelin, and Lyria advanced through the shattered streets, the very ground beneath their feet pulsed with a sickly rhythm, a breathing of the Blight itself. The air was thick with a heavy rot, sweet and sour, clinging to their skin and clogging their lungs. Shadows flickered in the periphery, as if the darkness itself were alive, whispering secrets too dangerous to heed. Elara's sharp green eyes scanned the landscape, her breath shallow but steady. The once proud spires of Varelia's capital rose like broken teeth against the bruised sky, their edges blackened and oozing with the creeping corruption. Tendrils of the Blight seeped into cracked stone and splintered wood, moving with a grotesque fluidity that defied natural law. Lyria walked beside her, clutching a tome wrapped in faded leather, her silver hair a beacon amid the gloom. Kaelin brought up the rear, his tall frame a shield against unseen threats, muscles coiled and ready beneath worn armor. "This place, it's more alive than I imagined," Lyria whispered, her voice barely audible over the faint, sibilant murmurs that drifted through the air. Elara nodded, feeling it too. The Blight was not just a rot, but a sentient force, sprawling and incomprehensible, yet aware. It watched them, its consciousness intertwined with the land itself. She reached out with her senses, pushing past the fear, attempting to touch the whispering voices that danced just beyond comprehension. The ground trembled beneath their feet as they entered the core. Here, the Blight's corruption was absolute, a living nightmare of dark, glowing veins that wriggled like serpents across every surface. The air shimmered with arcane energy, the residue of ancient magic that had birthed this plague centuries ago. Elara could feel the weight of countless lost souls embedded in the decay, their anguish woven into the Blight's fabric. "Stay close," Kaelin murmured, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, eyes sharp and scanning the shadows for threats. The warrior's presence was a balm against the oppressive dread. Lyria's fingers traced a protective sigil in the air, her voice low and steady as she chanted words of warding. The ancient incantations were fragile threads of light in the overwhelming darkness. At the center of the heart lay a mass of swirling rot, pulsing and shifting with unnatural life. The whispers rose to a chorus, voices overlapping, sometimes pleading, sometimes mocking. Elara stepped forward, her heart hammering in her chest. She spoke aloud, her voice trembling but resolute. "I am here to listen, to understand." The Blight responded, not with words but with a wave of sensation that washed over her mind. Pain and curiosity, hunger and loneliness. It was a consciousness born of desperation and ancient magic, seeking connection in a world that feared and fought it. Memories flashed unbidden, visions of the Empire's hubris, forbidden experiments that had birthed the plague centuries ago, and Elara felt the Blight's desire not just to consume, but to communicate, to forge a new existence. Yet fear gnawed at her. Could this entity be trusted, or was it a predator wearing the mask of dialogue? Kaelin's steady presence beside her was a reminder of the stakes, the survival of their people, the fate of the Empire. "Elara," Lyria whispered urgently, "the knowledge we seek lies within its core, but so do our greatest dangers." Elara closed her eyes, drawing strength from the memories of those she had lost and the hope she still carried. The Blight was both enemy and enigma, a force beyond simple good or evil. "I will face it," she said softly. "For them, for all of us." As the Blight's tendrils reached toward her, cold yet alive, Elara braced herself. The confrontation was not just physical, but a battle of wills, a test of her courage and compassion. In the heart of decay, she would choose her path, one that might save or doom her world. The whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a storm, and Elara stepped fully into the Blight's embrace, ready to confront the unknown. The air thickened, and the land seemed to hold its breath as the fate of Virelia hung in balance. The Heart of Decay awaited its reckoning. Chapter 16. Confrontation. The air hung thick with a suffocating silence as Elara stepped into the heart of the ruined capital. The sun, barely visible through the swirling dark clouds, cast a sickly pallor over the fractured stones and twisted remnants of what once was the seat of Virelia's power. Around her, the Blight writhed like a living storm, an undulating mass of darkly glowing rot, pulsating with an otherworldly light that seemed to breathe and whisper. The ground beneath her feet was cracked and damp, oozing tendrils of the corrupting magic that had seeped into every corner of this forsaken place. Her breath caught in her throat as she moved deeper into the abyss. The whispers grew louder, soft, unintelligible at first, then forming patterns that felt almost like words. Elara's sharp green eyes darted about, searching for the source of the voices. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a chorus of voices both malevolent and mournful, weaving through the ruins like the wind through hollow bones. She paused before a massive stone archway, its once proud carvings now smothered under layers of creeping blight. Taking a deep breath, she extended her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, scarred and worn from years of healing work, but her resolve remained unshaken. The Blight responded, parting to reveal a glowing core nestled within the corrupted heart of the capital, a vibrant pulse of light against the darkness, flickering with an ancient, almost sentient intelligence. Elara's mind reached out cautiously, weaving threads of empathy and curiosity through the veil of magic that separated her from the Blight's consciousness. The connection was fragile, like a thin glass thread stretched taut between two worlds. Flashes of memories rushed through her mind, visions of arcane experiments, desperate attempts to cheat death, and the terrible birth of this plague from hubris and forbidden knowledge. The Blight was not merely a force of destruction, it was a remnant of ancient magic, a creation born from the Empire's darkest ambitions. It sought not only to consume, but to transform, to reshape the world in a new image where decay and life were intertwined. It spoke in pulses of emotion, curiosity, sorrow, a longing to be understood. Behind her, Kaelin's heavy footsteps echoed softly. His tall, broad-shouldered warrior stepped into the dim light, his scarred face etched with worry. His eyes, sharp and watchful, never left Elara's form. Beside him, Lyria's pale figure was tense, her silver hair catching the faint glow of the Blight. Her penetrating blue eyes reflected both the scholar's thirst for knowledge and the fear of what their discovery might mean. Kaelin's voice was low but firm. "Elara, this thing is a plague. It's not to be trusted." She shook her head slowly, her gaze fixed on the radiant core. "It's more than that. It's alive, not just in the way we think of sickness, but conscious. It wants to speak, to be heard." Lyria stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper.
The texts spoke of such magic, experiments meant to grant eternal life, but this is the corruption of that dream. The Blight is the Empire's own sin, twisted into a force beyond control. The Blight's whispers surged, wrapping around Elara's mind like tendrils of smoke. She felt its ancient loneliness, its pain born of being both creation and curse. Her heart ached with the weight of understanding. The Blight was not simply an enemy to be destroyed, but a tortured entity seeking an impossible coexistence. Suddenly, the core flared brightly, sending pulses of energy rippling through the ruins. The ground trembled beneath them, and dust cascaded from the fractured ceilings. Kaelin stepped protectively in front of Elara, sword drawn, ready to defend against any threat. "You must choose," the Blight's voice echoed within Elara's thoughts, clear and haunting. "Destroy me, and you end what remains. Embrace me, and we transform together, life and decay bound as one." Her breath hitched. This was the moment she had feared and longed for, the moment when hope and despair collided. The fate of Virilia, her people, and perhaps the very nature of life itself rested in her hands. Kaelin's voice broke through the tumult. "Don't listen to its lies. It's a monster." But Elara's eyes were fixed on the glowing core, the pulse of ancient magic that mirrored her own turmoil. She thought of Mira, of the villages lost, of the endless cycle of death and rot that had consumed everything. Could destruction truly end the suffering, or would it only bring oblivion? She whispered, "There is no simple answer, but I cannot ignore the possibility of something beyond fear and hatred." The Blight responded with a surge of light that enveloped her briefly in warmth and cold, life and death intertwined. Elara closed her eyes, feeling the vastness of its consciousness, its hopes and pain entwined with the decay around them. When she opened them again, her decision was made. The choice would not come without sacrifice, and the price of forbidden knowledge was steep. But she would face it with the fierce determination that had carried her this far. The ruined city seemed to hold its breath as Elara reached out once more, this time not with fear, but with a tentative offer of alliance. A fragile bridge between two worlds forever changed by the Blight's haunting presence. And in that moment, the line between enemy and ally blurred, leaving only the uncertain hope of survival amidst the endless decay. The earth trembled again, and the fate of Virilia hung suspended, waiting for the dawn that might never come.
Chapter 17. The Choice. The heart of the ruined capital pulsed with a living darkness, a grotesque bloom of rot and corruption that stretched its tendrils like a vast, malevolent web across the crumbled stones. Elara stood before it, alone save for the faint silhouettes of her companions lurking at the edges of the desolate square. The Blight's core throbbed of an eerie luminescence, shadows twisting within its depths as whispered voices curled around her mind like smoke. Every breath she drew was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, mingled with the faint, unmistakable trace of magic that was no longer just a force of destruction, but something alive, something aware. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a fierce drum of urgency and fear. Years of relentless struggle, loss, and discovery had led her here, to this moment that would decide the fate of Virilia and perhaps the world beyond. The Blight was no mere disease. It was a sentient entity born of ancient hubris, a force that sought to communicate rather than simply consume. And now it offered her a choice.
From the shadows, Kaelin's presence was a steady, grounding force. His broad shoulders were tense, his scarred face grim as he watched Ilarma's silent dialogue with the living rot. His loyalty was unwavering, yet his eyes betrayed a turmoil of fear and doubt. Could he trust this unholy alliance? Could he believe that the Blight's whispered promises held any hope for salvation instead of ruin? Beside a fractured pillar, Lyria's pale face was illuminated by the flickering torchlight as her fingers traced the worn pages of forbidden texts. Her voice was a hushed murmur, chanting incantations that stirred the ancient magics intertwined with the Blight's essence. Her blue eyes, sharp and searching, flicked between the arcane symbols and Ilara's tense figure. The scholar's pursuit of knowledge had brought them to the edge of madness, and now the consequences of that knowledge teetered on the precipice. Elara closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind to the Blight's core. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into words not spoken out loud but felt deep in her bones. It was not a voice of hatred, but of survival and transformation, a desire to remake the world in a new image. The Blight did not seek annihilation, but rebirth, a fusion of decay and life, destruction and creation. Her thoughts flickered to Mira, her young apprentice waiting somewhere beyond the shadows, embodying the fragile hope of the next generation. Could this new path preserve that hope, or would it doom them all? A surge of warmth and cold washed over Elara as the Blight's tendrils reached out, caressing her skin with a sensation both alien and intimate. The rot shimmered with an inner light, wrapping around her until she was cocooned in an otherworldly glow. Pain and clarity fused in her mind as the boundaries between herself and the Blight blurred. She felt the Empire's suffering, the memories of those lost, and a strange peace settling within the chaos. Kaelin stepped forward, weapon lowered, but eyes wary, accepting the impossible transformation his companion had chosen. Lyria's lips parted in a silent exhale, her faith in forbidden knowledge vindicated, yet burdened with new uncertainties. Outside, the winds whispered through the ruins, carrying the scent of earth and magic entwined. The Blight was no longer simply a plague to be eradicated, but a force to be understood, mediated by Elara's changed form, a harbinger of a future where decay and survival might coexist. As the light around Elara dimmed into a steady glow, she opened her eyes, now reflecting the eerie shimmer of the Blight itself. The choice had been made, the path forward fraught with peril and possibility. The Empire's fate hung in the balance, forever altered by the healer who dared to listen and merge with the rot. And somewhere, beyond the veil of ruin and renewal, new bonds began to form, fragile, uncertain, but undeniably alive. The echoes of her choice rippled through the hushed silence, a haunting promise and a warning. Survival demanded sacrifice, and the cost of forbidden knowledge was never truly paid in full. Ilara's story was far from over. The Blightfall had come, and with it, a dawn like no other.
Chapter 18. Aftermath. The air hung heavy with silence, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves that had begun to reclaim the ruins of the capital. Elara stood at the precipice of the twisted heart of Virelia, the place where the Blight's core had once pulsed with dark, malevolent life. Now the land was quiet, but not dead. New shoots broke through the corrupted earth, fragile and tentative. The decay had not surrendered completely, but neither had it claimed everything. A breath escaped her lips, mingling with the damp mist that clung to the morning. The choice she had made, merging with the blight rather than destroying it, had been whispered as a salvation and a curse. She could feel it within her veins, a dark pulse that throbbed in tandem with her own heartbeat. The blight was no longer a foreign enemy. It was a part of her, and through her, a part of the world. Behind her, the remnants of the survivor camp stirred to life. Kalen moved among the wounded, his broad frame bending with surprising gentleness as he offered aid. Despite his stoic facade, the weight of what they had endured carved deep lines into his weathered face. The scar over his left eye, once a mark of past battles, now seemed a testament to the new war they faced, one against despair and uncertainty. His voice was low as he spoke to a trembling child, offering words of reassurance that sometimes felt hollow even to himself. The Blight's shadow lingered beyond the camp's fragile walls, a constant reminder that their victory was only partial. Mira, Elara's young apprentice, moved quietly through the early light, gathering herbs with a reverence that belied her youth. Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of awe and determination, a beacon of the next generation who had not yet been worn down by loss. The soft touch of dawn painted her face in hues of gold and rose, an emblem of resilience amid the Empire's scars. She was the promise Elara clung to, the hope that life could flourish again even when shadowed by rot. In a nearby tent, Lyria pored over ancient, crumbling tomes by flickering candlelight. The scholar's pale features were drawn tight with internal conflict. The knowledge tucked within those fragile pages held power to heal, but also to harm. She understood the delicate balance that Elara's choice had wrought. The blight was no longer a simple plague. It was a force that challenged the very foundations of magic and morality in Virilia. To wield its knowledge was to dance on the edge of ruin and salvation. Her nights were restless, filled with visions of endless rot and flickers of radiant light entwined. The empire of Virilia was no longer the thriving realm it once had been. The grand cities lay in ruins, monuments crumbled beneath the relentless advance of decay. But within the ashes, life stirred, a testament to resilience and adaptation. The blight had not been vanquished, but transformed, and so too had the people who survived its touch. Communities began to forge uneasy alliances, negotiating the terms of coexistence with the New World Order. Old prejudices and fears did not vanish overnight, sparking disputes and fragile truces. The balance was delicate, the future uncertain. But in the faces of the survivors, in the tentative green shoots breaking through dark soil, there was a glimmer of something enduring. Hope. The wind stirred once more, carrying with it the scent of earth and magic entwined. The Blightfall had come, and with it, a new beginning.
Chapter 19. New Bonds. The sun dipped low behind the shattered skyline of the ruined capital, casting long shadows over the twisted remnants of Virelia's once majestic spires. Elara stood alone on the crumbled balcony of the old imperial palace, her gaze fixed on the eerie glow pulsing beneath the cracked stones at her feet. The blight, now no longer just a curse, but a sentient presence, whispered softly in the undercurrent of the rotted earth. A voice she had come to understand, respect, and fear in equal measure. Survivors gathered below, their faces etched with exhaustion, loss, and fragile hope.
Among them were warriors, scholars, healers, and those who had once fled from the creeping rot, only to find themselves bound to it by circumstance and necessity. Elara's voice carried strong and steady as she addressed them, each word weighted with the gravity of their shared fate. "We stand at the edge of a new world," she began, her sharp green eyes sweeping the crowd. "For too long, we have fought the Blight as an enemy, seeing only decay and death. But it is more than that. It is a force, a consciousness born of our own hubris and magic. To survive, we must learn to listen, to understand, and to live alongside it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some hopeful, others skeptical, and a few openly fearful. Yet none dared deny the truth of her words. The old ways had failed, and the empire's ruins bore witness to that failure. Nearby, Mira moved among the wounded and weary, her young hands gentle but precise as she applied salves and bandages. Her bright eyes shone with a fierce determination, a beacon of the next generation's resilience. Where Elara was the seasoned healer tempered by loss, Mira was the hopeful apprentice, eager to learn and to heal not just bodies, but fractured spirits. "You must believe," Mira whispered to a trembling child, "that even in the darkest rot, life can bloom anew." Kalen lingered in the shadows, his broad shoulders tense and eyes ever watchful. His scarred face betrayed years of battle and loss, and though his loyalty to Elara remained steadfast, his pragmatism warred with the idealism that now guided their fragile alliance. Watching emissaries, some human, some twisted by the Blight's influence, approach the makeshift council, Kalen's hand never strayed far from the hilt of his sword. Lyria stood beside Elara, her slender frame cloaked in the remnants of scholarly robes, silver hair catching the fading light. Her blue eyes reflected the secrets she had uncovered in forbidden texts, knowledge that had brought them to this precipice. She spoke quietly, her voice a soft counterpoint to Elara's rallying cry. "The Blight is not merely a plague, but a transformation. It carries the echoes of ancient magic, a power we can neither fully control nor ignore. Our survival depends on embracing that complexity and on the courage to face what we do not yet understand." As twilight deepened, the Blight's tendrils curled gently around Elara's feet, their dark luminescence pulsing like a slow heartbeat. She knelt, reaching out with hands both steady and tentative, her fingers brushing the creeping rot with a mixture of reverence and resolve. "I hear you," she whispered, eyes closing as the whispers filled her mind. "Not as an enemy, but as a voice that must be understood." The moment stretched between them, a fragile bond woven from desperation, hope, and the shared will to endure. Night fell, cloaking the ruin in shades of deep indigo and silver. Around the council fire, survivors shared stories and plans, their voices weaving a tapestry of tentative cooperation. Mira's laughter broke through the gloom as she taught a group of children to recognize healing herbs, her youthful energy a balm to weary hearts. Elara rose from the balcony, her silhouette framed against the stars beginning to shimmer overhead. She felt the weight of the Empire's past and the uncertain promise of its future. Somewhere in the whispering rot beneath her feet, the Blight awaited, no longer a nameless terror, but a sentient force entwined with their fates. "Tomorrow we begin anew," she thought, not as conquerors or victims, but as partners in a world forever changed. And as the wind carried the soft murmur of the Blight's voice through the broken streets, a single question lingered in the cool night air. Could this new bond hold, or would fear and old wounds unravel the fragile hope they had fought so hard to forge? The future was uncertain, but for the first time in many moons, it was alive with possibility.
Chapter 20. Blightfall. The air was thick with a solemn kind of quiet, broken only by the faint rustling of new leaves pushing through the cracked earth. Elara stood atop the hill, overlooking what had once been the heart of Veralia's grandeur, the ruined capital now a patchwork of blighted decay and tentative sprouts of green life. A soft dawn light cast muted hues over the landscape, where shadows of the past mingled with fragile signs of renewal. The Blight's dark tendrils still glowed faintly, coiling like veins beneath the surface, but they no longer seemed solely harbingers of death. Instead, they whispered a new language, uncertain, cautious, but alive. Elara's sharp green eyes traced the horizon, her worn hands clenched loosely at her sides. The weight of her choice pressed heavily upon her, yet beneath it lay a strange clarity. She had chosen not to destroy the Blight, nor to let it consume what remained of her world. Instead, she had forged a fragile alliance, a precarious balance between decay and growth, destruction and creation. It was a gamble on survival that demanded faith in the unknown. Below the hill, Mira knelt beside a small garden, her youthful face alight with concentration and hope. Tender shoots pushed steadily through the darkened soil, nourished by a blend of earth and magic that Elara had helped nurture. Mira's hands moved carefully among the plants, gentle as a whisper, embodying the promise of a new beginning. Nearby, Kaelin stood as a silent sentinel, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the early light. The scar crossing his weathered face softened as he watched the young apprentice with quiet pride, a rare softness breaking through his usual stoicism. "She's going to change everything," Kaelin said, almost to himself. Elara turned, a faint smile brushing her lips. "She already is." Inside a shadowed chamber, lined with ancient tomes and relics, Elara and Lyria pored over the forbidden texts that had once seemed so dangerous. Their voices were low, threaded with the weight of knowledge and the bittersweet realization of its cost. Each word carried the echo of centuries, the Empire's hubris, the tragic experiments that birthed the Blight, and the delicate magic that might yet heal or doom them all. "The Blight is no longer just a curse," Lyria whispered, her silver hair catching the flickering candlelight. "It is a part of this land now, intertwined with its fate. We can guide it, but never fully control it." Elara nodded, her gaze distant yet resolute. "We must learn to listen, to respect the balance. It's the only path forward." Evening approached with a soft twilight glow, and a small group gathered around a modest fire. Survivors from scattered communities shared stories, tales of loss, of courage, and of fragile hope. The flickering flames danced in their eyes, reflecting the resilience that had carried them through the darkest days. Elara sat among them, her presence a beacon of determination, her heart heavy with the memories of all they had sacrificed. "The Empire we knew is gone," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the ache beneath. "But from its ashes, something new can rise, not as we dreamed, but as we must." A murmur of agreement rippled through the circle, the shared understanding knitting them closer. The future was uncertain, a landscape of decay and survival intertwined. Yet, within that uncertainty, burned a stubborn ember of hope.
Elara's journey had brought her to this precipice, haunted by the past, burdened by forbidden knowledge, yet fiercely determined to carve a path where life and decay coexisted. The Blight's dark tendrils were no longer a threat, but a conversation, a fragile dialogue between two forces that had once been enemies, now seeking harmony. As the stars emerged, twinkling faintly above the healing land, Elara closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The scent of damp earth, mingled with the faint hint of magic, filled her senses. This was the world she would fight for, not the empire of old, but a new world born from the embrace of ruin and resilience. The story was far from over. The Blightfall was but a beginning.